Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us again for another discussion as we continue this conversation about the community and the addict and recovery and all that. We're gonna build a little bit more off of our discussion that was started last time and kind of keeping that focus on the community. I want to, if we can, I want to kind of talk about the two different community camps that the user finds themselves in. And so you have the one camp that is very much enabling. That's where they're getting their supply from. Don't change the status quo. That community could, that surrounds them there. Even though they're in isolation, there's still friends around them and fellow users around them that enable. And then you have the other community let's use the version of the tracks. On the other side of the tracks, you have this other community of sorts that wants to help their loved one, wants to provide the recovery, wants to see healing brought and wholeness restored. And so for the user to find themselves between the two camps, how can, basically just from this point in the conversation, how, I guess kind of maybe explaining why there might be difficulty for the user. We might have touched this before, but I think maybe refreshing us, having why the user would have difficulty transferring between the two communities. Maybe is a good place to start, and then we can just build off this conversation from here.
Okay. Well, kind of from last week. Was it last week? Yeah. Last week. Yep. I just wanted to say one thing real quick, was that nobody can actually save the addict. The addict
Yes.
has to save themselves.
Absolutely.
So I didn't want that to be confused, because I know last week we talked about how maybe you could put some pressure,
right,
or give some alternatives or things like that, but you can't actually make that decision for that addict. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a messy thing from the camp that is completely
the indulgence.
Yeah, indulging, and then the camp who wants recovery, because there is a blur there.
Yeah.
Because some of those people who want you in recovery also do enable you.
Okay.
And part of that is because as you in addiction, what happens is you almost train the people around you, mm-hmm, to help you continue in that addiction.
Okay.
And they don't necessarily, it's not like they're sitting there choosing like, oh, I'm going to help him,
right,
or her, but they fall into that,
right,
and so there's a little confusion sometimes for the people who are in, like, we want something, they know they want something better for you, but they also have fallen into some of that trap,
right,
so kind of to start off though, in the community that is actively, mm-hmm, enabling or whatever,
yeah,
how do you make that transition? For some people, I think that just ripping off the Band-Aid,
yeah,
and just cutting it all off is their best course of action. For me, it was hard to let, mm-hmm, go of, because I really believed that these were my friends, right, and things like that, But the truth of the matter is that they were all in the same sickness,
right,
and so they weren't. I don't know that they were trying to keep me from getting, into recovery or staying clean. It's just that they were so far in their own addiction,
right,
or whatever that may be, that that they want. It's a comfortable. Well, so it's comfortable for someone like me who's in addiction,
yeah, to
be around somebody else who's in addiction, and when that person decides they're going to leave that,
yeah,
suddenly there's a hole there, like, oh my God, my
yeah,
guy is gone, or
yeah,
whatever, and the reality of it is that we weren't really friends,
right. So it's kind of like you have, so within that enabling group, you have the active participant of, hey, let's go do this together, hey, nope, stick with me, and they're actively holding you. and then you have the passively withholding, that passively hindrance, where it's just, hey, this is what we do whenever we're together. This is, I picture like you're in the room and you're all breathing the same air. That kind of passive, like it's not, it's the fact that they're not getting help, so you're not getting help. Kind of passive, versus, hey, I'm gonna make sure you don't get help, or I that might be a bit off. I guess I'm just kind of.
They need your help. They need your help to feed the addiction.
Yeah.
That's that group.
So it's almost
need each other to help each other feed that addiction. That's all. After that, like you said, after that, it's like there's no true friendship there.
Okay. So
I help you get high, you help me get high, and that's why we're
okay. So it's like you're all leaning on each other's shoulders to make sure that you both feed the beast.
And and part of this also, just to kind of put it out there, is that in my addiction, some of the people that I used with were also some of the people that I did dirt with, meaning criminal activity,
right?
Whatever that was.
Well, because they have the same need that you do,
right? And so that causes you to maybe out of fear not want to break that bond or whatever it is,
Well, because if I turn on them, they can turn on me, and then
right, and so it's not that you're turning on somebody when you go into recovery. It's just that you're letting go of that, and that's scary for them because he could reveal me, or and it goes both ways, and so that's why it's difficult to pull away from that. It ain't just the addiction; it's everything that's happened within that. Within that circle.
Well, because going back to that community, that even though the the bonds that are holding you guys together are those dirty behavior, are the addictions, and that's what's like kind of like the contract that binds you guys together.
Right.
But then around that, what you've done is you've developed a community. You developed, and so that those. They are, even though superficial or various levels and degrees, they are all relationships, and that does require a level of intimacy, and by that I mean like a level of openness, of leaning upon and be going back to that whole raw, that rawness that you all share, and that community, that's an adhesive to a community. Right. And so breaking that adhesive, breaking out of that community, I can see where that can be a very, going back to you said ripping off the Band-Aid. I mean that's
hard to do that.
Let's be honest. How much does that hurt?
Right.
One of the stupid things, and this is a kind of a stupid sideways illustration, is when I was in college, me and a few buddies decided we wanted to wax our backs. And we were being stupid college boys. And so you get the hot wax, you lay it on there, you put the strip on there, you rub it off, it feels nice. That moment you get that nice hot wax. Well, then it's like, okay, guess what? That's got to come off.
Yeah.
And you got a bunch of Christian college boys trying not to swear as that thing comes ripping off, and you just feel the pain. But that's the same.
Right.
You got to rip that Band-Aid off. You got to rip that strip off in order to break out of that. And that, I think sometimes that can be a hindrance to some people.
Well, and it's a separation that happens, so, you kind of look at it, well, I'll say for me. For me, it was almost like a grieving, because suddenly I was saying goodbye to not only the person that I had been for a very long time, but to the people who were in it, and that was hard to do, it was scary because it's making a decision to make new friends, which is never on everybody's list to do all the time.
And it's never, the older you get, I think the harder it gets sometimes.
Right, and so it's the same for those addicts, because they'll try to drag you back in.
Oh yeah.
There's no doubt. I've had several of them, and I used to sell drugs, so so when I got out of prison,
right,
a lot of those people started to contact me right away. You know, like, hey, are you and it was like, it was difficult to say no, but I just didn't want to be back in that, you know, and it was difficult because I like them people. You know, there's some not, you know, like they're addicts, but they're also people, and some of them are very likable.
Well, it's going back to the community. See, because community is a good thing.
Right.
You might have been involved on some terrible things.
Right.
But communities are designed that humanity was created to need each other. People were created for relationship. We have a need for one another. Right. And so we base our social structure around that need for one another. And so these likable people who are approaching you, they're from a former community. And so you see the relational, you see the community part of them, you see that relational part of them, you see these good people who are making poor choices. Right. And so, sorry to...
No, that's okay. You know, the thing is that I think as an addict, you're forced almost to become charismatic, you know, because you have to suck people into your own to your own bullshit. You know? And the thing is that it's a sickness. So, and sickness like sickness, you know, so it just kind of, it gets real messy and it feeds into itself. Yeah. And, you know, and even though you're on the path to recovery, that sickness is still in you. Right. You know, like I've told you before, I will always be an addict till the day I die. Right. You know, and so I will always need to have maintenance in my recovery. Oh yeah. Because the second I stop doing that, I'm on my way back. You know, because it's something that's within me that just, you know, is an addict. And, you know, I don't know how exactly that occurred. I know we've talked somewhat about that, but
a little bit.
It's there now. Now I need to deal with it.
It's the deep hardwiring of the brain to... they've actually done studies where like neural pathways, neural highways are essentially paved and made in concrete in the brain chemistry that says, hey, I've got to go this way. Right. And those highways, they don't disappear. Right. You have to constantly train to avoid those neural pathways. Right. Because otherwise, if you just go into automatic, I mean, you're going to go down those ways that are just familiar, and you're going to get on that pathway, and your brain's we're going to do this with my brain today, and go down that. Right. So as in recovery, it's almost like you're constantly having to choose which road you're taking when you think and you process and the actions you do. I'm using the highway as an example of just neural thinking. Yeah. But
Right. And part of the recovery is also repaving those highways. So that you, so you try to make a different way of thinking for yourself, and that just takes time. Oh yeah, you know, because you know, the more that you continue to think in that way, the more it becomes just kind of habit to think in those terms.
Well, you create those ruts, right? And then so you have to
fill them up.
You have to fill them up. You got to get. You basically got to change that way, and that. Because you can slip back into those old ways, but if you repave, you go in a different direction, and you train yourself. And I think sometimes the longer you're in a particular way of thinking, the longer it'll take to break it out. Right. Like I'm not saying you know, you've been an addict for, you know, you've been using for a month, so stopping is going to be easier than for those who've been using for a year. But that's a very poor example because people are so different, and you have no idea how the brain chemistry is affected by that. Right. But
I don't know that would be true either. Because because I was in addiction for a month, it still is going to take a lifetime. For recovery.
Yes. So. And that's why that's why I said that. It's very kind of a poor example.
Yeah, it was.
It was. See, I make mistakes too.
I'm kidding.
But that's the idea though, is that each person is so unique, but then the recovery is, like you say, it's always a lifetime because you know, you've tasted something. Right. And you enjoyed it. And now you actually have to actively not pursue something that you enjoy.
Right. It reminds me of something somebody once said. It's like It has nothing to do with my loved ones, how much I love people, what I want out of life.
Right.
You know, it has nothing to do with trying to hurt people.
Right.
It's just business.
Yeah.
You know, when you put yourself in that position and the addiction comes calling,
yeah.
you go. When
Mm-hmm.
it tells you to jump, you say how high.
Right.
Because that's the position you put yourself in.
Yeah.
And also it reminds me of what you said about ripping off the Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sacrifice is painful.
Yeah.
You know, sacrifice is not easy. Otherwise, we'd all be making God very proud. You know,
right.
if it was something easy to do.
Oh, absolutely.
It's painful. You know, those are our desires, and addiction is. You know, this might be a little left field. This might be a little out there, but I have this idea of using and drinking drugs and alcohol. Using is almost like an incantation to invite these negative influences into your life.
Oh yeah.
These things and like you said about the two different places, you know, and you're stuck in this darker area.
Yeah.
You know, the people involved, even possibly yourself, you know, myself, we are all part of that negative influence, and you try to get out, and those influences, it's their job to, like you were saying, pull you back in.
Yeah.
And and any addict would be lying if they said that they were over here and they didn't look over on the other side.
Yeah.
For a second, man, I would like to be over there.
I'd like to be like that person.
Yeah.
I'd like to have what he has.
And just to kind of, one of the things that he just said was that, you know, we live over here in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole point of this, is that we want to get into the community where we're not living in the dark anymore. We're shining light on what's going on, you know. And it's such a complicated. This whole thing is so complicated. Is there a right answer? Is there a wrong answer? You know, there's just so much to it.
That's why we're processing it.
Right.
I think it's a different plane above.
Right. And so the transition part is like he said, you know, I think we've all been like, I just want out. Excuse me.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want out. I can't do this no more. You get so just like I gave up. Mm-hmm. To the point where I just gave into it, and at that point, somebody else, meaning law enforcement, had to pull me out of my addiction, because I wasn't going to stop.
Yeah,
you know, I was going to go until I killed myself on it. You know,
right. Well, that going back to that rock bottom, you had to hit, and going back to, you can't make the addict change their stripes. Like you can't make them change their behavior. You can't make them clean. It has to be them,
right?
You know, and that's, you know, as a pastor, you know, I have people contacting me all the time. Hey, can you save my child? Can you give the gospel to my child? It's like, I'll present it, but you realize if they want to be saved, if they want to accept what Jesus did, it's their choice, and that's
what it's meant to do.
Exactly, and that's where, like, you know, God doesn't come in and say, okay, I'm going to save you, and just defy our self-will.
Right.
You know, he puts the choice, and then we have the choice to choose that freedom or not. And it's the same thing with the addict. You have the choice, but you got to get to that place.
Right.
And then once that choice has maybe been cognitively made, now, okay, I've got to leave one camp and go to the other. Right. And I think that's where now what was once an internal dialogue, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, the user and his community. What once was an internal dialogue, now makes a choice he wants to be clean. Now it's not an internal dialogue anymore. Now it's an internal war. Yeah. Internal war. So it goes from having a dialogue, I'd like to be clean, to, okay, I'm going to be clean. Okay, now you have an internal war occurring where you have a group that are like, hey, let's not change the status quo. And you're like, I need to break off of this. So now we're looking at the role that the recovery community can play.
Right. And for me, I had to be jolted out of it.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to make that choice. I was beyond that.
Yeah.
You know, and not every addict is the same. So
right. Exactly.
So there's a, you know, they may have had a different process, or, you know, whatever, to get into recovery. And just to kind of point that out, that's why I think it's important for us as a community to start shining light on this.
Yep.
Because when they have that moment where they're like, God, that looks so much better, there's pressure on it, and there's light on it, and it might make it a little easier for somebody so that they don't just give up. Because I know a lot of addicts who have just given up, and they're just, and they don't know, they don't have the will anymore to even try to stop using.
Right.
And that's kind of where I was at.
Well, so I guess good words for the I'm gonna the enabling community and the recovering community. So some good words for the recovery community is when you noticed somebody go from, and this is gonna be hard because again it's each individual is so different.
Right.
But when you notice the internal dialogue in your loved one go from an internal dialogue to an internal war, that's your cue to step in. And that's hard because you have to be very discerning, you have to be very intuitive, you have to know them, and this is the hard part where for the recovery community, sometimes to protect themselves they have to put up certain boundaries.
They absolutely have.
And they have to, but then at the same time, so the boundaries are set, but no matter what boundaries you set up, make sure that you have an avenue you can take so that when your loved one is ready to be pulled out, you have the means to do that.
I like that,
yeah. There's a thing in recovery where they talk about you'll pull me down before I could ever pull you up. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because we are addicts, and
right.
And we can fall back a lot quicker than we can. I can't pull you up.
Right.
All I can do is show you a life, show you a way, help you if you need it. And by helping, I don't mean making that choice for you, because one of the things is that as an addict, even though I might be in recovery or whatever, if I ain't making that choice for me to stay in recovery or for my own recovery, then whatever the reasoning behind it is not going to work.
It's superficial.
So if I'm doing it because my pastor said, hey, we've all noticed you're in addiction, you need to go to this, and I start, and I'm like, okay,
I'm doing it to make him happy.
Right. And it'll be temporary.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because it's not your initiative.
Right. And I'm not saying that there's been people I've known who've been in recovery for 20 years, gone back and used, And so I'm not saying that it's permanent, the hope is that you can stay in recovery permanently, but but it's very wishy-washy. There's so much to it, But the one thing that I can say from you to start from the active using to the recovery is you have to make a decision right now, today, every day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use, because that's where it begins.
Right.
I'm not going to use, and the thing is that what's so hard to pull away from it is guilt. Mm-hmm. For me, it was hard to get away because every time I started to get clean, I started thinking about all the shit I did.
Right.
I started having feelings, which I didn't, normally have, and feelings were hard to deal with, especially as a man. Mm-hmm. You're always kind of taught to just kind of hold those in.
Oh yeah, I can control my emotions.
So my feelings were a big issue for me in the beginning, and the way I felt about who I was, and the way I felt about the whole thing. Was a struggle.
Yeah.
And the only way I got through that was I went to meetings and I listened to people who also had those feelings and how they got through it.
Right.
And it made a difference.
Yeah.
Even if it was just for that day to get me through, that's, eventually you get to a point where it's there's so much more to it, but at the beginning it's real raw.
Yeah.
So there's you have to make sometimes decisions on a minute to minute basis. You know, just you're just trying to get through because inside you feel crushed.
Yeah. Well, I guess, and that might be hard. So you're having to make this journey from one camp to the other, and we can call this the pathway of recovery. You know, you got a lot of what I was hearing is a lot of unworthy. Like,
absolutely,
I'm not worthy at all. I'm not worthy of what.
I don't deserve recovery.
I don't deserve recovery. I don't deserve what this guy's got. I don't deserve his life. Like what the confidence that this guy over here is walking in. Whatever's drawing you out. Whatever that you look over and you're like, hey, that camp looks amazing. Right. You don't feel worthy of it. I
don't belong there.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And so you have guilt. You have unworthy. You have this self.
I've struggled with that for a long time.
Well, and so I think
I don't belong here. I'm not. These people are too good. You know, I don't want to mess it up for them.
Yeah, and I think that's where this community, what would be very helpful for the individual in recovery, this community and the larger community. This is why the immediate recovery community has to have a surrounding community around them as well, a strength to lean on, is because as this person's coming out and coming into this road of recovery, and they're struggling with that self-conviction, that self-guilt, that unworthiness, that self-condemnation that's so big, that in order for them to really make it all the way through, or to at least make it some good progress, is for people to be transparent, like to really love them. Say I'm not enabling, not the enabling love, but the hey, I'm still with you. You've got this. You've got what it takes. You're worth it. We all make mistakes, and it varies. I'm using umbrella terms here.
And there's a difficulty for, because you're not just talking about the people in recovery, but you're talking about like the family.
Yes.
The people. Friends and family, things
like
that.
All that people being transparent.
And part of that difficulty is that that they don't know how to trust that this is real. Mm-hmm. And it's completely understandable. And so, a lot of times, do they want to put their neck out there? Do they want to? Is this it, or is this just another game so that they can get money out of me, or they, what I mean? Like that's where I imagine they go.
Yeah.
So but here's the thing is that there are ways to protect yourself.
Right.
And still make sure, like, give them a ride to a meeting. That,
right.
Well,
you have that, like, okay, so this water bottle right here, you have this water bottle right here, and that's the community trying to help you recover.
Right.
And so instead of my hand, I'm using the water bottle now. And then this community, in order to protect themselves, they have to have boundaries.
Absolutely.
They have to have boundaries. They is this recovery real? How much is this going to cost me? How much, like, what, are they going to turn and burn on me? And so in order for this people to operate confidently in their boundaries, they have to have a community around them
to support them
to support them, to make sure that, hey, your boundaries are not,
to bounce ideas off of, to get an understanding.
Yeah.
I agree. And here's the thing is so at me being an addict, when I started down that road,
mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't sure that this was going to be a thing or not.
And that's where.
So how can I expect somebody else to be?
And it's an unfair question. Say I'm a family member, and you're going through recovery. You're starting this new phase, new recovery process, and I'm your family member who I'm trying to support you and love you, and I see this. It's unfair of me to say, is this legitimate?
Right.
Because you don't know.
Well, I don't know that that's unfair. Now, I mean,
really? Yeah.
I don't know that you being honest and about where your head is or anything else.
Maybe it might be a good expression to be like, hey, I'm taking this with a grain of salt. I don't know. Like this is a really good question. This is a really good.
So for me, it goes back to that whole idea of the person that surrounds them. The
mm-hmm.
healthier that they are,
right,
the harder it is for the addict. Well, if they're healthy, they're going to express things that may not be comfortable for the addict.
Right.
But this isn't about coddling the addict.
No.
This is about let's see if we can get this to the, you know, because so I personally, like I said, I wasn't sure where this was headed, because there was half of me that was like, yes, I want that, and yes, I'm fucking tired of this. Excuse me. Yes, I'm tired of this. I can't live like this. I'm sick of it. And then there was that other part of me that was like, I just want to go get high. I just want to forget that I even was thinking about doing this, you know, and because I've been in it so long that it was so much more comfortable to stay in the sickness than it was to become
go through the recovery,
the change that needed to happen, the different, you know, like the day-to-day had to be different. Just everything changes.
Well, so I think that
change is scary for anybody.
And I think that's why, like, when we talk about the community, why the community needs each other and to be healthy, and because having that clear communication, I think that's the really key. The closer you are to the person who needs to go into recovery,
the harder it is.
The harder it is, which also means I tell this to people who are raising kids. If you have a strong-willed child, you need to be a strong-willed parent. Right. And the reason for that, if you're a weak-willed parent and you got a strong-willed child, that child's going to rule the house.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so you taking that idea, you have a strong-willed addict who's trying to go into recovery, which you need to come in as a strong-willed recovery specialist. You know,
so there is
a healthy person, and says, hey, don't you screw with me, and I won't screw with you.
So and we've basically talked about the community and how they can help that person who's closest to the addict, and what you know, being supportive and everything else like that. One of the things that I have not brought up yet, that is an avenue for somebody, is there is a program called Al-Anon.
Okay.
And what that is it's kind of the codependent, or the people who have who do have addicts in their life.
Yep.
And they are supporting community within themselves.
Okay.
And they, you know, and they are able to kind of help each other and talk about it and everything else. And you know, and I'm not saying that that's for everyone. I don't know, because I'm not in Al-Anon, but I'm putting it out there that that there are other avenues.
Right.
You know, you don't have to. Although church is good too, you know, but whatever works best for somebody to get healthy and to have support is the goal. Yeah. So whatever that means.
Yeah.
You know.
So as a church, what we do here at the Assembly of God here in Albert Lea, what we do here is we help individuals with access to Teen Challenge. And so we send our kids to Adult and Teen Challenge USA. We send them out to, we partner primarily with the Rochester branch. And it's really fun, because the way that works is the addict has to make the initiative. And then they fill out the paperwork, and then they get taken to Teen Challenge, and they enter into a residency program.
They don't get taken. They make the choice to go.
They make the choice to go, and when I say taken, I mean,
I
know they are taking you away. No. But when I say taken, what I mean is a community member who's trying to help that person recover is making the investment and literally the drive to drop this person off at Teen Challenge. Right. And the reason why I love Teen Challenge is it's a separate community of fellow people going through the same journey with a support team that's already in place, and then they are out of their communities. They're separated from that. I mean, socially and geographically, they're separated from that enabling community, and they're in a place that is focusing on spiritual growth and emotional and physical growth. Right. And so it's a very fun program. So that's what we do. So I was like, you know, when people come to me and they say, hey, Pastor, I need help. I want to get clean. I say, okay, how bad is it? You know, how long have you been using? I take an assessment, and then I say, okay, how serious are you? Are you willing to make the investment to go to Teen Challenge to get clean? And then we make sure, as a church, we make sure that happens. And sometimes it's perfect. Sometimes they come back and they don't relapse. But there's times where they do relapse and they have to go back.
That's the thing is, going into a rehab facility, it's easy because you're taken away from everything. You're taken from the world. You're in a tight-knit group. You got a routine, schedule, and you feel really good, really good. I've been to rehab twice. First time I got out, instantly went back. As soon as I felt great about it. I was going to be sober for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
well, I got out, started using it.
Geographically, you're over here.
Yeah,
you're over here in this great recovery, and then you have to come back home, and then there's that like you said when you got out, this old community started contacting you again, and so you come in and you're like, well, here's my friends, we're hanging out. Oh,
hey, energy. They need more of that power.
So it's almost it's almost as if and this is what I'm thinking is, and this is part of this conversation that we've been having, is how can we strengthen this recovery community so that once they come back from that treatment, when they come, there's multiple parts. Like there's the part of like helping the addict come out initially. They go, they get clean. They re-enter the geographic community. So now the recovery community's got to say, okay, we're gonna surround you to make sure we don't want you to feel like you have to go back to that old place. So I don't want to use the word training because that sounds too much almost. But it's almost like we need to equip, shed light on, enable this recovery community to be stronger, to stand beside the individual in recovery, so that this old draw loses its appeal. Does that make sense?
It does. But
it
does and it doesn't.
Okay.
It does make sense because yes, it's important that when somebody gets out of, when they come back from wherever they went and their back's just, because a lot of times what happens is everybody's just dropped right back where they were.
Right.
Okay.
And that's we want to avoid that.
It's important that there's some kind of community support or whatever, or or a way for. You can't protect the addict.
Right.
You can't do it. It's just not possible.
Right.
Because if I come out of there and I go and I get there, I'm the one who in the end makes that choice.
Right.
If I'm going to go use, I'm going to go use. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop
that. That's kind of, I've we've said before, I've never been a user, but one of my fun problems, this is going to kind of be silly, I love Mountain Dew, man. If anything, I'm an addict to Mountain Dew, and caffeine addict, sure. And it's kind of a cheap shot on myself, but the problem is when you try to go cold turkey, and you walk by that store, man, you see all those beautiful green bottles staring back at you, and it's like, oh man, I remember that taste. So what do? You go to the Dollar Tree where it's the $1, $2 for a big old 2 liter, and you indulge on some good old. But that's
there's a good point in there that when you get into recovery, sometimes you forget some of the bad stuff and you glorify what I remember this time or that time, and and that's a dangerous place to be in someone's head when they're an addict. They have to remember the shit that they went through,
right.
And the thing is that, I understand what you're saying about, you got to take the addict and blah, blah, blah. But my biggest thing is what can we do for the community?
Right.
So that, let's say this addict comes back out and goes back to using. What about that person that tried?
Right.
Let's surround that person. Let's stay honest with them. Like, this might not work.
Mm-hmm.
This whatever you do, it might not help.
Right.
But how do we keep you healthy so that you can continue to leave that light on, shine that light on the addiction, and how can you stay healthy so that you keep those boundaries,
right,
and you keep this idea that you're not going to make it easy on the addict.
Well, so like one of the things that we do in our house, when we go to a restaurant and it's time to order food, we order our drinks and our meals based upon pre-established boundaries. And as a grown adult, that can be easy. Not always, but it can be easier. And like, this week we're not getting dessert. This week we're not, we're not ordering sodas this week. We're going to order water, and so we set those boundaries in place. And then when we come to that restaurant, we're in there, and then the kids, oh, can we get this? Can we get this? And someone has to remind them and say, no, we've already talked about this. This is what we're doing. To take that concept and apply it to the one in recovery, having that openness and keeping light on. And I love how you always say that you're always in recovery. I love how you always bring that up. Right. Because to me, what I'm hearing is I have a boundary. I have a boundary that I'm not crossing. And so what helps me is saying, okay, here's a boundary for you. I'm going to make sure you don't cross that. I'm going to make sure that whenever we're together, that, hey, is this a temptation for you? Is this how can I help you not to cross that line again? And that
you're not going to participate in allowing me to
exactly
cross that boundary.
And
that's perfectly legitimate. You can't stop me from crossing that boundary,
right.
But you can stop yourself from participating in that particular situation. And so the bridging of it is I think we kind of touched on this backwards, not really.
We did.
Was that that bridging is the addict, and the people who are in recovery.
You gotta be both ways.
Kind of placing those boundaries. I'm here and now I'm here. Well, the boundary is I don't want to go back there.
Right.
And then you make another boundary. I want to get healthy. And another boundary. How do I do this? I have to stay away from these. Like you're setting these boundaries along the line, along the way.
Yeah.
And so for my mom, she was pretty, like I said, for her, she had a community of people, the church here, who surrounded her and were healthy and helped her to get into that healthy state of mind and everything else. And so when recovery came, she asked me what are some of the things that I can do, but she also was like, these are the things that I will be watching for.
So she had her personal boundaries,
right? And
then I love that I said that she asked you, implying to me at least, what needs to be your boundary. So she had her boundaries. Right. Then she was asking you, where do you need boundaries?
Right.
And the only reason she was able to do that and to have the strength to enforce those boundaries is because she had a community of people around her to strengthen her.
Right. Because we all need somebody. None of this can be done alone.
Right.
I as an addict, I can't. Even though as an addict I have to make those choices,
right.
I don't ever make them alone because I need that support. But one of the things is that the best time to find out those boundaries, just for everybody is when they first are getting out of treatment or first in recovery, because that's when they're gung-ho about it.
They're gung-ho.
Like, these are the things that I need to have as boundaries.
It's all fresh in my head.
Right.
So don't
wait until it's too late.
I like what the Bible says. Don't put off what needs to be done today. Don't put that off till tomorrow.
Right.
So when they get fresh, hey, they just got released. It's their first night at home. You're at the dinner table. Get the paper out. Say, hey, first night. This is great. What do you need? And go and not need as in clothing, snacks. Right. No, we're talking boundaries. What boundaries do you need? Here's the house boundaries. Right. Here's my personal boundaries. Right. And it's okay to have boundaries. I think that's the other thing that for the people in the community, because we think sometimes when we want to love people,
it's not only okay. It's required.
It's required.
You have to require this in your own life. And here's the thing: is that when you catch them at the beginning like that, what happens is that this is what they really want, and at that moment they're going to be honest, and more than likely some, if they're not really interested in staying clean, they're going to give you some weak ass boundaries, and they're going to be like, but I'm saying, so it can give you an insight into the addict and what they might need, and that's different for everybody, you know. But for me, it was make sure that I am not out all night. You know what I mean? If I'm starting to be out all night, that's an issue.
Right.
You know, and that's a boundary you need to see. You know, and
Well,
it's about foresight. You know, being able to see a kind of ahead before that person gets back into it.
You're going from a place of structure,
Right.
and then you're leaving that place of structure. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the recovery is very, very structured.
Right.
They have to come back to a place that is nearly equally as structured.
Right.
And that help, because you know, people they get used to boundaries. Boundaries feel safe. Coming back, that continued process.
Right.
Keep those fences up.
Right, because it can dissipate quick.
Yeah.
You know, and the other part is that you know, if I stopped making meetings,
Yeah.
if I wasn't talking to somebody in the program,
Yeah.
you know, like these are the types of things that need to be watched. And I'm not saying like you know, being on top of me kind of thing, but
No helicoptering.
But be aware, you know, be aware of what, you know, what choices is this person making, you know, and but also understand that you can't stop that addict. You just can't. There's, you know, but you can protect yourself,
Right.
and you can make it more difficult.
Yeah.
But there's no way for me to be like, you are not doing this. Come on, you know, because
Right.
I guarantee you, for me, I rebel against anyone who tells me what I can't do.
Right.
And I will go do it, you know.
Right. Oh,
And,
yeah.
And sometimes I do that in recovery, even,
Yeah.
you know, because it's embedded in me, you know, and it's not that I always want to do stuff like that. It's
Right.
just that, you know, it's an automatic reaction because it's like, who are you to tell me what to do? This is my life. I'll do what I want.
Right.
You know, and it's, you know, it's complicated.
Right.
You know, as an addict, I'm a very complicated person when it comes to things like that.
That accountability partner, the one who's enforcing the boundaries, maybe is a good way. Enforcing boundaries, I'm going to use the term accountability partner for that. They come alongside you, and yeah, they can't make you do anything.
No.
They're it's like trying to bend something that's not supposed to be bent. You break it,
Right.
and so we don't want to break you, but we have to make sure that there is a little bit of I don't want to say pressure, and that's the wrong word, but there's that. I'm going to be on task with you. I'm going to be forth with you. I'm going to ask the tough questions to make sure that you're, you know, staying within the boundaries, that you're not going backwards, that you're still moving forwards. And so I'm going to make sure that I'm there processing these things with you so that you don't go backwards in that. But I'm not going to sit there and realize, hey, succeed or fail, that's on you. That's not on me.
Right.
My part is to make sure that you operate.
And that's
that way.
important.
Yeah.
Is that you know, no matter what happens with the addict, as the community, it's important that they stay healthy.
Yeah.
And not take things personal, and not make it about, you know, I guess just don't allow it to affect your own happiness, your
Right.
own, you know, because if you are not healthy, if you're not healthy and you're surrounding me, how, you know, as an addict, how am I even
Right.
going to understand what that means? And that's so that's a bonus of what the NA program that I attend. That's the bonus of that, is that I surround myself. I get in there, and there's a lot of healthy people in there, you
Right.
know, and there's different stages, you know.
Yeah.
It isn't just so, you know, like I see the journey from the beginning
Yep.
to 25 years.
Right.
I get to see all of that journey, and that helps for me to see where my path, you know, what kind of path, and
Yeah.
then they give you suggestions on how this is how we did this. This is
Right.
how you can do it. This is, you know what I mean? And so it's ultimately it's up to me to make those decisions and everything else. But my biggest concern in this, because I feel like the community, I hate saying that I just feel like that the sickness from addiction has spread. It's like a cancer that continues to spread and it's even getting into the community where they just don't even want to. They want to put blinders on because they're sick of looking at it.
Right.
You know, I get it. I'm sick of looking at it too. I'm sick of seeing it in the paper. I'm just sick of it. You know, and so I want to put it like, you know, it's not happening or whatever. Well, for me, I decided that I needed to stop doing that.
Right.
Stop being blind to it, see it for what it is, and create me and the people around me, create a healthy environment so that we could shine light on this, because I can guarantee you, an addict, they love to stay in the dark.
Yeah.
They love that because then there's no exposure to them.
Right.
And the less exposure means the more I can do.
Right.
You know, but you start to expose some of that, and their world becomes a little smaller.
Yeah.
And then the pressure might make them, you know, like I said, the whole goal of this was, can we get them out before they kill themselves?
Right.
Can we get them out before they have to go to prison?
Yeah.
You know, like that's the goal. And in order for that goal to be accomplished, you know, I don't know if it can be accomplished. Let's put it that way.
Well,
but in order for that to happen, the community that surround, and I'm not talking about Albert Lee as a whole, but I'm just saying, like, the community that surrounds that addict,
that recovery community
has to be healthy.
Yeah.
They have to be healthy in their own, and they have to be strong, because they have to understand that this is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be, you know, as an addict, I pushed every boundary I could.
Right.
And I did the dirtiest things I could possibly do to somebody. And I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
So because I'm ashamed of those things, it just becomes a cycle where I do it again, because you know, and then I get high because I want to cover it up, and it's a sickness.
It's a learned behavior, single track that you're on, circular single track of behavior, and that's, you know, to get that I'm calling the recovery community, and when I say recovery community, I'm talking family and friends that want to see their loved one made whole, and so not the whole town. I'm talking about, you know, 5 people. You know, I'm talking about that recovery community.
Those people who are sick of seeing you go through this and want to help.
And if, you know, for those listeners, you have an individual who you want to help, you want to see them in recovery, you need to make sure that you're healthy. And so step 1, if you suspect that you have a loved one who's going through these steps, and we talked about the signs in previous episodes. You suspect that that's going on. Step 1, make sure that you're healthy and strong, and do that by finding a strong community to surround yourself with, a larger community to help equip you, to make sure that, you know, there's no holes in your, I'm going to use armor as an example there, that when you have to go to war to fight for your loved one, there's no chinks in your armor, that you're strong, that you have a healthy grouping around you, so that when you have to enforce the boundaries, when you have to make the tough call, when you have to do those things, that you're in a healthy place.
Oddly enough, in that situation, your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness.
Yes.
And that's loving that person.
Right.
You know, so you really have, so your best armor for that is honesty, and to be honest with yourself. Not necessarily everybody around you, but to be honest with yourself and say, look, this is, you know, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
That's the most important, number one thing for a recovering addict is honesty, man. Yeah. You go into a meeting, you're going to see it everywhere. Honesty, honesty, honesty. If you're not honest with yourself, like you were saying about a strong-willed addict needs a strong-willed sponsor or someone to help them through, that's up to the addict to be honest with themselves. Yeah. You know, I can get any kind of sponsor. Yeah. You know, if I need a strong-willed sponsor, I need to be at that point where I'm ready to be honest with myself and say, all right, I need this person as a sponsor, not this person. You know?
Well, and that's going back to someone who you know is going to ask you the tough questions, like
exactly.
to hold the tough accountability and like make sure. And so I want to take it a step further. So you have the addict position, you have the initial recovery person who's going to ask the honest questions. And when I say honest, I'm using tough and honest side by side, because an honest question is, hey, did you use this morning? Were you using this morning? That's a tough question to ask, because
I'm gonna lie to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I did, I'm gonna lie to you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is that if I didn't, I mean, I'm gonna say I didn't. But if I did, I'm gonna say I didn't.
Right.
Because A, I don't want to disappoint you, and B, I don't want to be exposed before I can get back into my addiction.
Well, see that, and that's going back to that exposure.
Right.
But then what the recovery team, the recovering community needs, is people around them who are making sure that they don't cross boundaries with their loved one. My son needs an extra $100. Why does your kid need an extra $100? You know, and so you see the thing. What are they going to do with that money?
But I'll come up with legitimate reasons.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
so that's the honest
the problem.
communication.
The addiction is manipulative.
Yeah.
It's convincing. The lies are convincing. The you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why, like last session we had, I talked about, you know, sometimes, you know, you don't want to believe your gut, but
Right.
stick to it.
Yeah.
Even if that means that this person legitimately needed that, you know, stick to your gut. You know, and not only that, but check.
Yeah.
So if I say I need $100 because I got to go get tires, instead of giving me that money,
Go get them tires.
go with.
Yeah. Well, that's why with that surrounding community, the surrounding community around the recovery community.
Right.
Hey, my son's doing this. Okay. Well, instead of giving them that cash, you know, if I have a parent who's having a child in recovery and they're doing this stuff and they talk to me, I'm like, okay, that's great. Well, why don't you do this with them instead? So I'm bringing that third perspective that's somewhat distant, and they're asking for help and strength on how to handle the situation. Right. I can say, you know what? Giving them the cash to go get tires is probably not the wisest thing to do. You know that they've been using. Right. You know that they'll go back.
That's important, and it's important that that person who's being asked to say, you know what, just give me a minute, and let them go call.
Yes.
And say, hey, you know, what should I do in this situation?
Get that outside perspective, because you're still being that recovery community. You're still properly loving your individual that you're helping. But then you need strength to make sure that you're making wise decisions. So get that outside advice, get that counsel, you know, and say, hey, this is what's going on. How should I handle it? What would be the best way? And then you have somebody who says, okay, well, giving them cash is not the best way to do it.
Right.
Take them out there and cover it yourself with them.
And here's the thing is that, you know, it doesn't always have to be like that.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I'm saying at first it should be like that.
Okay.
But as time goes on, you know, you'll be able to really see what they're up to, you know. Yeah. But I'm going to tell you right now that if I am trying to trick you, I'm not going to be honest with you, and I'm not going to give a shit about your boundaries. Excuse me. I don't. You know, when I'm in addiction, you know, it changes me as a person, and my moral compass is gone. Right. You know, it's spinning, and so there's really nothing. You know, so I want you to be fully aware that you can only keep yourself healthy. You can only make the right decisions for yourself. You can't do that for the addict, because the addict is going to be an addict. Right. You know, and I'm saying that from experience. Like, my mom tried every which way but loose. Mm-hmm. And it didn't work. All it did, every time she tried to be like, you know, do this, I manipulated and used that to my advantage to get high. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, my only goal was to get high. And so I want people to understand that you still need to protect yourself. Right. You know, it's okay to lend a helping hand. Right. You know, but you have to be very, very aware of what you're doing when you do that. Yeah. Well, it has to be conscious decisions. Yeah. It should be run past somebody who you have in your circle that is helping you to stay healthy, and you should do it in a very thoughtful way. Which means if I say, hey, look, I just got out, I need some food.
Right.
Take me to go get food. You
Right.
know what I mean? Don't give me money to go do it, because you might have to do that because you don't have the time to go take that. But I'm just saying, like, you have to really be aware, because as an addict, I will manipulate every situation I can. You know, and I feel despicable saying that, because I know that's who I am as an addict, and it sucks, but it's the truth.
Well, so we have there. So two big things on here. First is as a church, you get people calling asking for handouts all the time, sure. and so as a policy, as a church, we want to make sure that we're not taking advantage of, that people are not abusing us or using it for nefarious. So we ask, well, what is the need? If they ask we need lodging, then we work with the community and we get a room for them.
Right.
If they need gas, okay, well, meet me at this gas station. I'll meet you there. We fill their tank right away. So we do those steps where it's like, we're not going to give a handout. We'll give this way. I had one person ask for money for food. I said, well, okay, what hotel are you at? What room are you in? And we ordered a DoorDash, and we had the food delivered to them. Right. So that's one of those steps that there's creative ways around that.
Right.
And then the talking about the boundaries and everything. And I remember growing up, and my parents always taught me that trust is built over time, yes, but wrecked in a second. Yes. And so when we know that those who are in active addiction are lying to us, and even in the recovery, early recovery, if they're trying to get back into that mess, we have to recognize that trust has been violated and broken, and you have to go through rebuilding it. Which means for the recovering community, you have to have boundaries, even though you're being honest with each other and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. Because let's be honest, right? You're going to lie to me if because you don't want to violate the new perception that I have of you.
Right.
But that trust has not been rebuilt yet. Right. So I need to make sure the boundaries, the personal boundaries I have in place, are established, that no matter what is honestly being said, that no matter what is going on, that it's not, those boundaries are not built on trust, because trust is non-existent.
They're built on reality.
It's built on reality and practicality. Right. And so now I'm saying trust can be rebuilt, but that's going to happen over time. That's going to take a lot, depending on the level of trust that was shattered and what occurred. Right. That varies the time taken for that rebuilding of trust.
Right.
But you can't put boundaries based on trust, because that's been shattered. And so you have to practically in reality, here's the new boundaries. And you know what? Hey, if I'm going to ask you these hard and honest questions, the chances of you lying because of stuff is going to be really, really high. So that trust is still not there. Like, you have to see the evidence in order for trust to be built back up. And then as that trust does come over time, however long it takes, as you begin to see certain indicators of how trust is coming, then you can expand those boundaries based upon those new realities that are being shown.
Well, here's the thing, though, is that if you see somebody who's in recovery, they're going to need you less and less.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that when somebody comes in recovery, that they don't need help, because they will need help. They will. I mean, no matter what that is, because you can't just jump back into life and like everything's perfect, and I'm all good. You're going to need help, and some addicts won't even ask.
Right.
And that's a problem, because they're too proudful, or they're too ashamed, or whatever it is.
Right.
They might not ask. So you might want to be a little intuitive to,
right,
hey, why don't I take you out for dinner?
Right.
Or just something, the thing is that it's so complicated. There's no right way to do any of this.
Well,
and I don't know what that is.
You almost have to go back, and I don't mean this demeaning, and this just might be my own perception, but you almost have to go back to, when it comes to that family unit, you go back to raising them as a kid again. not that they're children. I mean, varying ages. They're going to be teenagers all the way up to grown adults with grandkids. I mean, there's a wide scope of it, but the level of freedoms that they get to have is very much like you were raising them as a kid. We're like, hey, here, like going back to those boundary talks is
There is some of that.
there is, but it's it's one of those things where hey, because part of it's trust, part of it's his inability to handle. But there's certain things that my child is not allowed to go out and go do because he's not reached that maturity and self-disciplined level of doing. And we can use driving a car as an example. You don't get your driver's license until you're 16. Why? Because you have to be a mature thinking. You have to have a level of training involved. You have to have a level of judgment involved in order to drive a vehicle. That's why, if you make poor judgments, one of the things they'll do is they'll take your driver's license away because you can't make proper judgments anymore. So going back to that idea of raising a child, you get the addict to come back in that place and you got these boundaries. They're not going to stay in that place. They're not going to stay the equivalent of a parenting analogy here. They're not going to stay a 5-year-old in your home.
Right.
They've got to grow, learn to make good judgments, learn to make proper disciplines, and grow and learn and become, like we've been talking before, healthy in their own right.
Right.
Which means they have to grow. And so as they grow, guess what? They get more freedoms. Okay, my kid's this old, so he gets to do this now. Hey, he's 15. He gets to get a learner's permit. And so as they reach that place where, again, the recovery is still continuous, but the boundaries and the trust grows as you see progress in them, if that makes sense.
And I want to make it clear that it's not your responsibility,
Right.
to even help the addict.
Right.
It's not, because there are some people who are probably just done.
Right.
That's it. I've had enough. I'm done, and that's okay. If that's where you're at, that's okay.
Well, and that's a boundary thing, and that's
Right.
where hey, you take steps to protect yourself.
Right.
Now, for the addict that's in that position where everyone has been shunned and pushed away, you plug yourself into a community that will help hold your feet to the fire.
Right.
And that's harder because you're starting with a whole fresh new community and you got to be vulnerable with a whole new group of people.
Right.
But there are people out there who are willing to do that for you.
Absolutely.
And you plug into them.
Right.
For those who are completely burnt out and they have that boundary where I cannot help this individual, that's fine. That's okay. That you're in order for you to stay healthy, you can't re-engage. And that's, so don't take that self-condemnation. Maybe it might be like pointing them and say, hey, if you go over here, they'll help you out. I can't. Right. But if you go over here, and that might be the level of involvement that you can get. And and that varies. That's just one example out of many.
But the point I'm making is you are not responsible for what that person does or the choices that they make. And you are not responsible to have to take care of that person or to help them or anything else. That is not your responsibility.
It is, yeah.
This is how can we as a community choose to make that transition from this community to this community not only easier for them but for us. How can we make it easier for us so that there's so much to it. Like I said, it's just what can be done, and I want to make sure that everybody's clear that you are not responsible for the addict.
Right.
Do you want to help them? Most times, parents, siblings, friends you've grown up with. Most times they want to. Yeah. Some of them are burnt out. Okay. You don't have to be involved. But you could be a support for someone who is involved. Or things like that. But those are the people that like I said can be wishy-washy too. Yeah.
Well,
it's complicated, and I don't know.
There is, and this is going to be really. This might offend many people. There's this interesting account in the Bible, in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In the Gospels, there's an account where Jesus is getting ready to send his disciples out to the neighboring cities. And so Jesus is one man, and so he wants his message, the good news of what he's come for, the good news of the Bible. He's getting ready to send the disciples out, and he tells them, and this is really fascinating. He tells them, don't take anything with you. You rely on the goodwill of people to take care of your needs. Okay, that's great. But he says, when you go into a city and you present the message to them, if the people don't receive you, if they don't take the message, if they don't receive you, you leave that city, shake the dust off your feet, and go on to the next. And that's kind of offensive in the way that's like, wait a minute. So that whole idea, if they're going to ignore your efforts to save them, if
save them's a bad word. Save them's a little
help them, heal them, make them whole.
Right.
Thank you for pointing that out. But if they're going to, if they're going to rebuff every effort you're making to help them in their recovery,
it's okay to dust.
Dust your feet off and walk away. Because I had a minister. I had one of my mentors. He's like, I will go the miles with you if you're willing to change. I will go with you as far as it takes if you're making steps and willing to go through the process. But if you're not willing to change, I'm not going to waste my time. And that can be a little bit harsh at times, but I get that because Liz, we're limited as far as people can go. Our time is limited. Our strength is limited. In order for me to stay healthy, there's only so much I can do. And if I'm going to help someone and they're keeping on fighting me every which way, and I'm taking that personal mission, guess what's going to happen? They're eventually going to wear me down to a point where I won't be healthy.
That's what I mean. They'll drag you down.
So it's like
quicker than you can bring them up.
So the recovering communities, their health is paramount in order to help the recovery person.
Right.
So, but if the recovery person keeps on, don't take it personal. They're making their decisions.
Right.
And you cannot blame yourself for their choices.
And here's the thing is, so if the recovery community that we're talking about isn't healthy, what exactly as an addict do I have to look forward to? Because if I can't see something that is better, what's the point? You know? So, not to mention the fact that it's better for that person to be healthier and happier and whatever else, So it's paramount just in general. For everyone in the world. To try and be healthy. And the way to do that is first you have to be honest about reality in your life. And sometimes that's the most difficult thing to do because it's hard to reflect on ourselves and really be honest about this is a problem for me. Because you've known that problem for so long that you've almost kind of held on to it to a point where you don't even see it anymore.
Well, and that's why having that surrounding community is so important.
Absolutely.
I go to my family all the time and I say, hey, this is what I've been struggling with. This is, I've had some really hard discussions this week, and it's just been one of those days. And hey, if my behavior changes or if I'm becoming a harsh person, please
be honest with me.
And that's the point, because we when we live with ourselves, we don't realize how we're changing.
Right.
Because we grow with it, and so it's so subtle for us that when we're changing, and so having people who will be honest with us, accountability, and I'm not talking about the recovery, I'm talking about the healthy person. Just in general, having those people who are like, hey, when you said this the other day, it was a little bit off, and so hey, when you did, and to help keep me, that accountability to help keep me strong and healthy. So that the community that needs me, I can present that, right. and that's not just for me as pastor. That's everybody in this whole community.
Right. You may not be able to take that in right away because sometimes it takes time to process.
Right.
Like most people's reaction to being, somebody coming at you is to be defensive.
Right.
And so you have to give yourself time, and you know, just because you present something to someone does not mean that they're going to accept it, change it, or anything else. And that shouldn't be the purpose. You know, the purpose should just be to, you know, here's kind of what I see. You know, do what you want with it, and you can move on past that. You know, because it's not your job or your responsibility to make sure that somebody else does something. You know, and that's what I mean about the addict. You it's not your responsibility. But, you know, but if you're, because my heart is in recovery. You know, my heart is about, I would like to help addicts, and I would like to help see this whole thing change, because my heart is there. That's where, you know, my focus is. Not everybody else's focus has to be there. You know, I'm talking more to the people who have been touched by it in some way, shape, or form, and find themselves thinking, God, what can I do different? What can I do better? How can we get together to make this change? You know, and so that's really where I'm at with all of this. Because I am an addict, and I will always be an addict, and I will always have to work at this. And every time I see somebody new come in, it just reminds me that I'm still that person. You know, it's in there. You know, it's just that I've changed everything else, but the addict can always come back, and people make mistakes, and you see them come back in from a relapse or whatever, and you can see the pain in their eyes and the disappointment in themselves. You know, and it sucks because you know how to get this recovery because you've done it, but they have to make that choice, and we complicate things, and we make it so much more difficult than it needs to be, when really it's just a choice that we have to make every day. I'm just not going to use today, you know. Like, that's the first thing, you know. And then it's like your car, you know. You have to change the oil once in a while. You have to, you know, make sure you got windshield wiper fluid. You got to make sure that you have gas. You know, you got to check the plugs. You got to, you know, you have to do all these things to make sure that your vehicle doesn't just die, you know, and freeze up. What, you know, well, in order for an addict to stay healthy or to stay on that path, they have to do these things. And you know, there may be other ways, but the way that I know is through the NA program. And that means, matter of fact, last night the meeting was kind of on this, now that I think about it, is that you need to make meetings. You know, you need to get numbers of people who are in the program so that you can communicate, you know, so that you could call them when you're in need or when you just need to talk to somebody. You need to find a sponsor, you know, somebody who can say, hey, this is how I did it. These are the things that you need to do. You need to read the literature so that you can get a better understanding of this is what we have to do to get to this point. And then it also shows you how it works at the same time. You know, this is how, in the end, this is where my healthiness is. And the 12 steps themselves it's a 12-step program that leads you to spirituality. And that's the biggest part to me that makes the most sense. And again, that is why I reached out to you in particular.
Absolutely.
Is because spirituality is the goal of the program. Because when you lose that, you lose a lot of other things. And so your goal in the end is to become to gain a relationship with God. With God. For me, it's God. The program is a little different in those terms, but you know, that is the whole goal. Because once you build that relationship, there's a whole different there's a whole different way of looking at life and other things.
And it's fun because, you know,
I'm sorry I went off a little rampage there.
I believe it is in it's in Peter, and in First or Second Peter, it says that that God has given us everything we need for life and godliness. So God gives us all that we need to function through all this, and that's the other thing too, is understanding that we, left to ourselves, we can't make real lasting changes. And that's why I love how the support group that you're part of it aims to say you can't do this on your own strength. You need help. You need something greater than yourself.
Right.
And I think that's so key. The last time we came and we talked about we in the past we talked about having the community recognizing signs that watching your loved one's behavior to recognize that something's going on that they're using. That same kind of attitude has got to be the recovery group's same perspective to make sure that the change that they came back with is ongoing. Are they making their meetings? Are they reading the literature? Is this new behavior that they brought back, is that continuing and growing? And that's for them to really see, and that's important, is to make sure that growth is going on. And again, my family's not responsible for my growth. I'm responsible for my growth. You're not responsible for me, for my growth. You're responsible for your own. Right. And the best thing I can do is say, hey, I will give you the tools and I will give you the instruction, but it's on you whether to apply it or take it, and that's on you. Whether what you do with it is free from me. I just make sure that I present it, and that's and that help. So it's like that. One, it's not their responsibility to help, to heal, to restore. It's the tools go through them, but it's on the individual to apply it to themselves, and that's huge.
I think that I understand that we've gotten into some depth about different things and things like that, but the ultimate goal, I just want to remind everyone that the ultimate goal for us here.
Yep.
Is that we want to be able to shine light and stop keeping secrets and stop lying to ourselves about addiction and the impact that it has on the community. And the only way to do that is for us to just kind of explore some of these subjects.
Yep.
And if anybody ever has something that they want to know or explore, just ask, because I don't have a problem just putting it out there. If it's going to help, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that the reason we're going in depth is because some people may have questions about certain things, and so that's.
Yeah, and like I said, we're not experts.
I'm an expert.
You're an expert.
Yeah, I'm an expert.
You're an expert, and I
know how to use drugs.
you're an expert this is your journey,
right?
And I just love to learn. I don't have degrees in anything in any of this, and so I'm just a sounding board for this whole conversation, and I get to present the ignorant side, I guess. This. But
see, that's just it, though. Is I don't see it as an ignorant sign. What I see it as is that you don't know what
no.
So to me, it's that's the whole point of this, is gapping your point of view with my point of view, so that we can come to an understanding of what may be able to change, so that it only makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to discount it's not an ignorance. It's that you have your own way of seeing things, and it's important because you don't think like I do.
Yeah. No, and that's the beauty of this conversation and all these conversations is taking and bridging these gaps, having the dialogue, bringing it out into the open, and really discussing the realities of it all and all the different sides. So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you guys again soon. Take care. Bye.